Hi, I'm Diane, and today I just want to share with you one aspect of being sexually abused as a child from the ages of 12 to 16 years and the lifelong impact that has had in this particular area of being silent. So I think the silence begins right from the beginning, before any actual abuse occurs, but when the grooming process begins, because of course the abuser not only grooms the victim but also grooms everyone around him. Next, unfortunately, during the sexual abuse of 4 years, the abuser made it feel like an affair. So there were no threats as such towards me, but there was this feeling that I was in a relationship and having an affair. Now, of course, a child cannot have an affair with an adult. It's child sexual abuse. However, I had those feelings of like it was made to feel like an affair. And of course, what do two adults do that are having an affair? They keep it a secret. They keep it silent. And therefore, I think that played a lot into my silence during the abuse. Of course, the other big factor that kept myself and a lot of other people silent is the shame, the self-blame, the guilt, and all those feelings that get and beliefs that get put on you during the process of child sexual abuse. So fast forward from 1980 to 2020, and of course, as most of you will recall, there was a big event in 2020 called COVID. So during COVID, my mental health declined, and I needed to seek further help with that. Over the next 12 months from there, I started telling some people about my child sexual abuse after 40 years of being silent, with the exception I had told my wonderful husband a few years prior to this. So I started telling close, very supportive family, a few good close friends, and then also told my oldest sister, whose husband it was who sexually abused me. So I was like, okay, I've finally, after 40 years, started telling people, started getting some help with this trauma, and I'm not going to be silent anymore. I actually started a little Instagram page, initially anonymously, not identifying myself. And of course, I got so much support, and 99.9% of people I know have been supportive. The 0.1% probably dropped off without me noticing. And then, of course, as part of that 0.1% is also who was not supportive was and is my brother, which that's another talk for another day. So fast forward a bit more, and due to certain family trying to silence me, no obvious consequences for the person that abused me, and no action taken, no acknowledgement of like the harm that this abuse has and had done to me to that point and will continue for the rest of my life. So after much thought and a lot of thought, I decided that I would go ahead and press charges, as after all, it was a crime, and it is one of the worst crimes there is. So I got into the court and legal process, and that became a very long period of time, well over 2 years. Unfortunately, during this process, I also was silenced again, as recommended highly by the police and other legal people, that I be very careful what I put on social media, because if my case went to trial, then the defence could use some information I put on social media and twist it around and use it against me. So again, for a very long 2+ years, I basically had to be silent again. So 2+ years later, the abuser got convicted and sentenced in court for some of his sexual crimes against me. One part of that did occur was that I got to read out my victim impact statement, and that was a very powerful thing to do, and yes, that really helped me, and that day I wasn't silent. And in fact, after the court day, I was like, right, legal proceedings out of the way, everything done, so now I can speak freely about my experience of child sexual abuse. However, I was talking to the court liaison person a day or two later, and as I was chatting to her about, speaking more and sharing my story, she said to me, "You do realise that you have name suppression?" And I was like, "What? I have name suppression?" She was like, "Yes." I said, "Look, I know we've talked a lot about making sure the abuser didn't get name suppression, because I didn't want that, because I wanted people to know who he was, what he did, and what sort of person he was. But we had never talked about, or no one had informed me that my name was legally suppressed as well." So that appears to have just been an oversight by, a few different parties involved in the process. But it is a legal condition, and it's actually law in New Zealand that a victim's name of sexual crime is suppressed. So therefore, I had to go through a process to get my name suppression lifted. So once again, I was silenced for another 3 months because I had to write a letter to the judge. And why it took probably 3 months is because a portion of that time he was actually on holiday. So finally, after another 3 months, I was finally no longer silenced. So I suppose in summary, I was silenced many times throughout my life and this process. And I worked it out, it's probably about 46 years of my 57 years that I was silenced through different means, and particularly through the shame, self-blame, guilt, feeling dirty, all those sort of feelings as part of being sexually abused. So yeah, in summary, I was silenced during the abuse. I was silenced for 40 years after the abuse. I was silenced again during the court proceedings and legal proceedings. And then I was silenced again until I could get my name suppression lifted as a victim of a sexual crime in New Zealand. So this is why I am never, ever going to be silent again. And it's just so important that we talk about this topic to help survivors and also to prevent this epidemic continuing to happen of child sexual abuse, because it not only affects the individual, but I believe it is actually affecting our whole society. So no more silence from me. Thank you.